years have been challenging, from gaps within the healthcare system
to food insecurity
to climate change. But innovation is what transforms the future.
And youth are the ones leading it.
Building on generations before us
through intellectual property and sustainable development.
Intellectual property strategy is a core part of how Terramar goes about building our technologies and delivering them as solutions for agriculture, using knowledge gained through research with machine learning and artificial intelligence to deliver products and services that can transform how food is grown and improve the economics of agriculture for growers worldwide. We have 3 big goals related to addressing some of the most pressing problems faced by global agriculture, and are proud to include the fresh ideas of youth in helping build Terramar's innovation and deliver it to the world.
As society grapples with an ever-growing aging population, along with overdose fatalities and an increasing number of people suffering from complex medical conditions, we are ensuring that the correct pills are dispensed to the right person at the right time, supporting medication adherence and preventing prescription misuse. We have a robust IP portfolio, which includes filing patents that are relevant for other applications in the health space.
We develop virtual reality simulations that help learners learn in an experiential way. For example, being a firefighter going in to do a search and rescue, that's something that's very hard to learn through a textbook, so having a simulation like ours allows them to get that experiential learning. The IP that we've developed in-house is both our reusable code bases and API and the reusable 3D assets.
The world's changing faster than ever before.
But the next generation of youth have stepped up
to build, create,
and work together intergenerationally for the people of today
and tomorrow.
Across the globe, young innovators, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and inventors are stepping up to innovate. They are savvy, at the frontier of innovation, and the boldest at taking advantage of opportunities around them to steer a course towards a better future. Today, we're moving one step closer in that direction. Welcome to the Rise of Young Innovators. I'm Harith, your MC for today. The Rise of Young Innovators is proudly brought to you by Southeast Asia's leading intellectual property firm, KASS International. With over 30 years of intellectual property experience and 6 offices established across Southeast Asia, KASS strives to provide IP excellence to organizations from entrepreneurs to universities to listed corporations in securing and exploiting their IP rights both locally and worldwide. The Rise of Young Innovators is held in conjunction with World Intellectual Property Day, which will be celebrated on 26 April, with the theme IP and Youth, Innovating for a Better Future. This year, we celebrate all the bold and enthusiastic young innovators whose visions are shaping the next wave of economic, technological, and business revolution. Now, let's meet our panelists. Our first speaker is Azran Osman-Rani, CEO and co-founder at Naluri. Azran builds disruptive new businesses that challenge the status quo. His current venture, Naluri, is a digital health therapeutics company that uses AI tools to augment professional care for chronic diseases and mental health to make it even more accessible and affordable. He co-founded iFlix, an internet television service that was launched in 2015 and scaled to 20 million users across 20 countries before being acquired by Tencent in 2020. Previously, Azran pioneered the long-haul, low-cost airline model as the founding CEO of AirAsia X. He led the growth from startup to $1 billion in revenue, 2,500 employees, and a public listing in 6 years, breaking many low-cost airline industry conventions and introducing innovations. Azran held previous leadership roles at Astro All Asia Networks, the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange, and at McKinsey & Company. Next, we have Dr. Melissa Foo. Dr. Melissa is the head of Sunway iLabs Ventures, where she works with startups to co-create solutions for a sustainable future, leveraging on the network and resources of Sunway Group and Sunway University. As an angel investor, impact investor, and vice president of the Malaysian Business Angel Network, she is also actively involved in early-stage investments and innovation across sectors such as health, education, fintech, food and agri-tech, smart cities, retail tech, and social impact. Dr. Melissa has worked with the Malaysian Government Prime Minister's Department, Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation in various roles managing capacity building and accelerators for startups, promoting corporate innovation programs, and designing and implementing frameworks and funding models for technopreneurs and social impact finance. Some of the highlights include generating 3 times social return to the government through social impact bonds, establishing partnerships with 25 Malaysian corporations for entrepreneurship involvement, and managing around $400 million in deal flow for an entrepreneurship fund. Our next speaker is Dali Abdul, who is currently on secondment from PETRONAS to be Senior Director of Technology Transfer Office at Universiti Teknologi PETRONAS. Dali's focus is on key value proposition needed, valuing add offerings by integrating the technologies into solutions, and most importantly, closing deals where both industries and academia benefit. Prior to joining UTP, he was the head of technology commercialization and IP management for PETRONAS Group Research and Technology. He has been blessed with 20+ years of proven record of solving technical and commercialization issues and challenges in the industrialization of intellectual properties, both in PETRONAS and in Proton. This included 13 years of international experiences in the United States of America, Switzerland, United Kingdom, Japan, China, and finally, Austria. After 3 years stint at Proton, he took a plunge into entrepreneurship for 4 amazing years. Our fourth speaker is Vishantini Tangavaloo, with a background in chemical engineering from the Universiti Teknologi of PETRONAS and chemical and bioprocess engineering from the National University of Malaysia. She is the head of Product Development Department at Synergy Oil and Gas Engineering. Her present research interests are focused on the oil and gas industry's renewable energy and production enhancement. In recent years, she developed recognized commercialization products which were awarded the Spotlight New Technology Award at the Oil and Gas Conference Asia 2020. She also developed technical and marketable introductions on energy optimization across the industry. Vishantini actively mentors others and works with research in the field of production enhancement, renewables, and energy optimization. Her expertise is in the areas of research management, patent writing, and market research insight. Vishantini is also a professional technologist in the oil and gas industry, recognized by the Malaysian Board of Technologists. Last but not least, let's meet our moderator, Geetha Kandiah. Gita is a leading IP expert in Malaysia with over 16 years of experience in the field. She has extensive experience in strategizing, with companies in various industries on how to boost their value and expedite their growth using their IP assets. She frequently shares her expertise on BFM, Bernama TV, and regularly contributes articles to local and foreign publications. Geetha is a highly sought after international speaker who has been invited to speak at engagements and conferences in Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya for Japan Institute for Promoting Invention and Innovation, at Taipei for Taiwan Technology Industry Legal Officers Association, and at Ahmedabad for Indian Drug Manufacturers Association, and more. I know we're all excited to hear from our panelists, but allow me to read a couple of house rules before we start. All participants are muted and chat is disabled. The Q&A session will be at the end of the panel discussion. So if you have any questions for the speakers, you may ask your questions by clicking at the Q&A icon on your screen. Do participate in the polls during the panel discussion by simply choosing your answer when the polls are launched. Thank you very much for listening. Without further ado, the discussion will now begin. Over to you, Gita.
Thank you very much, Harriet, for the introduction to the event and to our esteemed panelists. Audience, we are proud and excited to bring to you our panelists. As you've heard from the introduction, they all come with vast experience and expertise and have so much to share with all the youth out there tuning in. But before we get started, let's have our poll. Let's see what is your view. Does age matter in terms of innovation? Do you need to be young to be an innovator? Yes, young blood equals fresher ideas, or no, the grayer the hair, the better. Let's see what is your view as it's spot on in terms of youth and innovation. Yes, younger blood matters. Well, there you go, panelists. You can see 67% say the younger the better, and we'd love to hear from you. That ties in very much to the question, starting first with Dr. Melissa Foo. Tan Sri Tony Fernandez started Air Asia, the famous budget airline company. We all know that Azran was from that company too. And he was 37 years old, close to 40, you know, the midlife crisis age. Whereas Kylie Ng was only 26 years old when he started Group Small, the deal buying site. Dr. Melissa, as head of Sunway iLabs Venture and also the vice president of Malaysian Business Angel Network, you would come across founders from different generations. Does age of the founder of a startup matter? What is your opinion?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Thanks for this very interesting question. I mean, it's something that we always think about, because even when you compare, you know, like startups that have IPO'd in, say, in the West or in China, the age of the founders actually vary quite differently, right? So just as an example, Alibaba, you know, during the IPO in 2014, the founder Jack Ma was 50 years old. Compare that to Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook's IPO in 2012, and he was at that young age of 37, young to some. So I think, you know, to that point, I think what my personal opinion on this would be that age used to matter when starting up businesses, because there was a lot of knowledge and experience and everything that was very necessary to accumulate. So if you look a few generations before us, you know, the traditional model was maybe to gain some experience before you start out your company, and you know, maybe a certain path, right, which was needed before you embarked on a business. But I think technology and innovation really changed that, right? So does age matter? I think age always matters to some extent, But what really matters is actually the knowledge and the experience and the skills and the network and even your motivation and drive that you need to start a business or start a company or pursue an idea. And I think technology, being so new, kind of flattened the playing field in that sense, right? You could actually have a fresh graduate with the same amount of skills or even better coding skills, for example, that allowed him or her to really change an industry. So I think it's not so much age, but it's about, maybe the skills that you need and the skills that you have to start something. And that's what I've been observing. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very insightful indeed. It shows that the trend of what technology has done in terms of speeding up what youngsters can actually have that skills and knowledge, even though they're young. Thank you so much for that sharing. Vishantini, on the same topic, on youth, some say that leadership can be nurtured. And the entire nature versus nurture debate. What do you think about being innovative? Is the person innovative due to their upbringing and exposure, or do you think they're intrinsically innovative?
Okay, I think that question is very much relatable to what Dr. Melissa was mentioning earlier. So I think it's, for me, it's really about the characteristic of a person. So they actually really start on the characteristics. If let's say they're actually very curious person, so they have to make sure they have very high curiosity, that's one. And also, when it's relatable, when it's come to innovative, people always like to relate with creativity and also critical thinking. But I think curiosity and also about how make sure they don't give up, because when it's coming about innovation or innovating, inventing something new, I think it's always about you not giving up. So that character, the fundamental character, is very important for you to be a very innovative person, because not every time when you innovate or invent something new, it's going to be very successful in the first round, right? So I think it's really about not giving up and also the curiosity. So the curiosity at a very young age will actually lead you a very long way to actually commercialize or successfully invent something new. So for me, it's really about the characteristics.
Okay, sounds like it's intrinsic then. It's your personality. What's your personality?
Yes,
interesting view. Dali, on the same question, what is your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, trying to echo what Vishantini is saying, it always comes back down, that chicken and egg kind of issue, right? Which one comes first? But if you really, again, I'm married with 3 kids, and if you really observe each one of your child, they all have different, again, like what Vishantini said, that characteristic is actually at a very young age. Each one of them have different characters. So now, where nurture comes in is if we, push down on what is they are naturally inquisitive, right? That each child. So if you always tell them not to pursue that intuition or their ability to be curious about things, over time they will kind of lose that. So it's like muscle memory, right? I mean, if you really want to build on something, you need to repeat and do it. So even someone who is born or blessed with certain abilities, if you don't hone it, it will disappear. So again, it all depends on, again, in the industry itself. If we are talking about things that require quick thinking, so I believe that is something that requires someone with that innate ability to be used to it. And where nurturing comes in is you teach them that making mistakes, it's not a problem. You can continue to hone it, and over time the mistakes or the failure that you make will make you a better person, make you a better innovator. Yeah. So I mean, again, it's a chicken and egg thing, but at the end of the day, it's personally it has to be both on my side. Yeah.
Thanks. I like how you said, like, you can have talent, but you need to enhance it, and that's when maybe nurturing comes in.
Yes.
Great sharing. Sarah Blakely, the female billionaire in the US that created Spanx, once shared that when she is sitting with her in the dining table with her brother and her parents, her dad always asked, "What did you kids fail today at?"
Yeah.
And she said that that made the biggest difference in her life because the dad kept asking that failure question. And he said that if you did not fail at something new today, it means you did not try something new today. And then, like you say, it's ingrained. If you ask these kind of questions, the kids come very much ingrained. Azran, I've heard an interview from you where you talked about parents asking you or including you at dining tables at a very young age, at 4 or 5, and giving you the opportunity to speak to adults. So that's very intimidating for a young kid to suddenly speak and voice opinions to adults. And you said that that shaped you, giving you that kind of leverage at a young age. So now on to you, Azran. A survey in 2020 found that 56% of Generation Z, or Generation Z, consider themselves creative, compared to 44% of those over the age of 24 years old. What are your experiences working with creative young innovators and entrepreneurs that have impressed you? What is it about the young that you like to share with us? What can the audience learn from your experience?
Well, I'm going to start by saying that I think successful young innovators are the exception rather than the norm. So I'm going to lean on why age matters a lot, right? And let's take creativity and break it down into what I call the 4 C's of really operationalizing it. And the first that Vishantini brought up, curiosity. Now, you might have a generation that says, yes, we're very curious. However, the problem is a lot of them are superficially curious, right? They like to, when they say they read, they're just reading internet articles, listicles, right? They just oversimplify or overgeneralize information like the top 5 ways or the 6 steps of success, rather than really reading deep books and scientific journals and meeting multiple people and learning perspectives. The second is courage. To have the courage to challenge convention, to go beyond the status quo ideas and beliefs, you must actually first master the existing status quo, right? You must start with some depth of foundational knowledge and experience. The third, and this is where age starts to really be an advantage, is the ability to communicate empathically, to be able to sell your ideas in a way that resonates with the target audience. Because a great artist cannot express her art won't go far. A brilliant computer programmer that cannot convey the purpose of his or her code won't make much of an impact. And lastly, character. Resolve and resilience to persevere when faced with inevitable setbacks and rejections. And this is, again, you need experience to bounce back, and you become stronger when you have to bounce back more often. And the flexibility to iterate and improve the idea or proposal based on accepting feedback, right? So curiosity, courage, communication empathically, and character. And this takes time to nurture.
Very, very interesting. It takes time to nurture, and also then goes to show that if you nurture it from young, there you go, Dali, your 3 kids start working on those 4 C's. Spot on. Thanks for that sharing, Azran. So youths who are tuning in, take note. Or not only youths, we have a lot of SME business owners. Every business needs to create or innovate, or they evaporate. Right? And innovation is key to having a sustainable business. So those tuning in, just jot down the notes and you'll get more insights as we go along. According to a recent survey involving participants born between the years of 1997 and 2007, 53% hope to run their own business within the 10 years. And that's the same, as you see from Speaker Azran, who went out and delved into so many different businesses. Dr. Melissa, from a family healthcare business, then goes on and look at angel investors. You yourself depict these statistics, and the proportion increases. It becomes 65% for those who are already in the workforce. So employees out there are all keen to start something on their own. For these aspiring entrepreneurs and innovators, Dr. Melissa Foo, what qualities should they portray? Because young innovators lack fund in most times, not just young, most innovators. What do investors, coming from your perspective of MBAN, angel investors, what do investors look for from these young investors, young innovators, in terms of wanting to invest into their business? What are the key factors they are looking for?
Yeah, actually, it is a whole host of factors, and I think Azran helped me a lot when he alluded to the 4 C's, in terms of curiosity, communication, character, and also courage. I think the reason why we have so many of these things is usually when we assess a startup, there isn't just one single data point that makes or breaks decision, right? Usually it's a whole combination of factors, and I think one you brought up a really important point, because sometimes it is the quality of the founder, or maybe more important so than the business model, or the because especially when you're in the early stage, we do expect that the business model will pivot. Yeah, so I mean, I would be repeating a lot of what my other panelists have said in terms of the quality that we look for, but the things that I think really stand out when I look at founders, or maybe in some advice to people who are thinking of embarking on a journey of entrepreneurship, is the ability to make decisions in an uncertain or volatile time, right? To make those calls, because I think as opposed to maybe say if you haven't started a business, or if you are starting a business, I think one of the key differences I've noticed with people starting their first businesses is the comfort level with making a decision, right? Like how well they sleep at night when they make something that they think is particularly risky. So some may call it risk taking. I sometimes think it's just decision making and uncertainty, but that's one of the key differences if you are thinking of starting a business. And one of the key things I think in investing is integrity. So I think there's a lot of a lot of fluff, a lot of things that goes on in the startup world. But I think one of the key things is really that integrity, that track record, and also the ability to work with people, that team. So founders sometimes think that it's a one-person job to do everything, but it's actually really, if you're thinking of starting a business, then, how do you relate to your co-founders, right? How do you build that trust and integrity and teamwork with your co-founders first, and then your investors? So I think these would be some of the things that I would add on to what's already been said about, all the special attributes in founders and entrepreneurs.
Great. That's a great tip, get familiar with co-founders and decision making before even thinking about funding. Right. So that brings you to our next poll. We have another question for all those who are tuning in. Innovate, rinse, and repeat. How does a company ensure that it constantly innovates? What is your view? Provide mentorship, promote as part of the company culture, rewards and incentives to innovate, or you bring the whip and the whole punishment mechanism comes in? Azran's nodding over there. So audience, do vote, and I think you can, single choice, so you only can do one choice.
Yeah.
There you go, rewards and incentives, 45%, followed by promotion of innovation as part of company culture, 42%. 13% have voted that providing mentorship is great. 0% on punishment.
That's pretty interesting, right? Because we know what made a lot of companies innovate in the last couple of years, right? The pandemic, right? Which we often call the chief innovation officer. So it was a very motivating factor for companies.
Mother of all necessity, right? It was not mentorship, it was not company culture, and it was not, what was the third one?
Rewards.
Rewards and
incentives, yeah.
I guess it is. Staying alive is rewarding.
Yeah, very strong incentive in a way.
Totally. Anyone wants to make any comments on all in the poll? Any views? Vishantini, on the poll, they say about punishment not even being voted. And you have incorporated innovation as part of your company culture, as senior product engineer and starting up that department in Synergy from no R&D department to just looking at innovation day in and day out. And not just you. You then have to speak to the engineers to cultivate that whole culture of innovation. How did you come about this? You cultivated it, invented your award-winning product, Synjet Pump. Do tell us your experience in setting up this innovation process or setting up a culture. What did you do and what were the challenges you faced?
Okay, I think in the initial days, right, when I came out with this, my products or even establishing my department in my current company, it was quite a challenge because I was the only one. It was just my boss and myself, my CEO and myself. So there was no structure. There was nothing. There was nothing in place for us to even refer to anyone. So what happened is we have a sister company in Jakarta. So I was sent to Jakarta to meet some of the innovators. So they have like an exhibition over there. So I have to go through the exhibition. I've attended and I've met all the innovators there to just get an idea how is the innovation process like and what you got to do, and just get some ideas on how they develop the idea up to commercialization stage. So once I'm back, I have to come up with some process or like a framework to actually to implement in my current company. But the only challenge for me was to change the mindset of my engineers in my current company, because they were so used, because we're a consultant-based company in oil and gas. So they're so used of doing things, what's being told them to do, the tasks given, so they do within that scope. So they can't go or not that they can't think outside of the box, it's just that they don't have an opportunity or platform for them to really express their ideas. So I have to really think a bit harder, like how are they going to be more participative for them to come up with some new ideas, because it cannot be I'm the only one coming out with some ideas, right? So that's when I actually established a workshop. So that's more of like I learn up on how to do design thinking, and also I've learned a bit of what is some of the methods, other methodologies besides design thinking. So the first thing is I was looking into Dublin methods, the type of innovations. So I think it's really about when you're innovating, right? It's for you to identify the type of innovations. It's not really about developing a product, but I think there's a lot of areas of innovations. There are 10 types of innovations besides developing a product or services, networking and all these sort of things. You really need to determine that, and then you move into applying or implementing design thinking methodology. So in my case, what I've done, like I've learned, I took up my own course, my own initiative on what is design thinking, how I can implement over here. And then I came up with my own framework, which is called the stage gate framework. That's one part of the innovation process, stage gate. So it has like few gates where I've incorporated design thinking elements inside it as well. So the first thing is like coming up with your problem statement. It's really about getting pain point from your end clients, and you analyze your problems from your end clients, and then you come up with a problem statement. And then it's the ideation process where you use some tools and ideation methods, and then you analyze and then go into the testing method to analyze your ideation, and then develop into the prototype. So each of these methods that I've incorporated into the stage gate, each of this, they actually have like a matrix, like whether it can go to the next stage. So before it's going to the next stage, I evaluate it based on some metrics, like I put in some calculations into it that whether this is worth going to the next stage, because I have to make sure all the resources, whether it's worthwhile, whether we are really addressing the client pain points. So all that it's in place, and then we can able to commercialize it in a very short span of time. Because when we want to establish this department, the time was really like a constraint for us, because you have to make sure that the first product that you're developing, it has to be in a very limited time frame, so that you can focus on other products that you are developing. Because once you have commercialized this, then the next will be very fast and easier for you to develop, right? So that innovation process took me a while to study and put that in place. And then I would really say the company culture, where they actually allow us to, they give the flexibility and the freedom for us to do what we want to develop. So it's more of encouragement from the boss, from our top management on like, okay, you want to develop this, okay, you have to just make sure that you have already proved them with some data that okay, this can be commercialized and everything. And they gave us the space of doing it. So it's more of team learning in this entire process, and also the shared vision that we have in our company. So for me, it's really these two. It's very important, the shared vision and the team learning. And it's easier for me to implement, and everyone else was like cooperating as well. So I think once I have my innovation framework in place and the culture, both actually really helped me to win award for my product. It's not one, but two products that I've innovated in 6 months' time, and I've managed to win the award.
Well done. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
It's all about fail fast as well. Sometimes you don't know whether it's going to take off or not. And I think that's the biggest fear a lot of innovators have. Thanks for sharing your experience in Synergy. Many companies fail to realize their ambitions due to gaps in readiness, even among committed innovators. One can be innovative and come up with many great ideas and innovations, but that doesn't necessarily mean success. What would you say? This is for you, Dali. What would you say that are two things that innovators need to focus on to successfully commercialize their innovation?
Okay, thank you, Gita. Actually, if you really look into it, it's not just two, but Azran brought up that 4 C's, and Melissa was talking about all those. What are the things that they look out for, founders and all this, and as well as Vishantini throughout when she was explaining all her steps that she goes through, her design thinking, and at the end of the day, I always believe that whatever we do, you must begin with the end in mind. I mean, at the end of the day, you are selling things, right? So there must be a customer or a client that you are thinking about. So if you are not addressing their pain points, and when I say pain points, it has to be a pain point that is keeping them up at night, or things, a pain point that is very intense, and it is now. It's not like when people talk about we become net carbon zero in 2050 and all this. These are things that are too far away for someone or an SME or an industry to say that, I have to worry about 2050, because at the end of the day, it's not about what will happen too far in the future. So therefore, in my experience, when I was I give you a very simple example. My son, he's starting out. He's 15 years old. He's starting out with his cookie business, right? So he baked the cookie based on what he likes, which is white chocolate chip. So I said, okay, this is great. It tastes really nice. But what we did was I brought him and introduced him to manufacturers, OEMs, and all this, on those who are already successful in producing chocolate chips. And the feedback that we got was, surprisingly, they said that, yes, it tastes nice, but this is not what the people want. People want dark chocolate chip. And we were like, oh, really? So that is an experience for my son, because he likes and he bakes things that he feels that he likes. But at the end of the day, to be successful, it's not about what we like, right? It's actually, at the end of the day, what the customer wants. And in this case, if we are innovating digital solutions and all this, it's not about what we think is the best solution in our mind, but it has to be able to solve the problem of the client. So having that discussion, having that ability to start with the pain point of the client or the customer, and you work backwards. I think that is what Jeff Bezos has always been quoting, right? It's, if I'm not mistaken, he is saying that Amazon is not competitor obsessed, they are customer obsessed. So they always start with what the customer needs, and then they work backwards from there. So, and I believe that's the right way, because first and foremost, that is what people are going to pay us anyway. So, but saying that as well, we do have people like Steve Jobs that came up with the iPad. It is not a pain point that anybody had at that time, because nobody, everybody had a laptop and everybody had a phone, and he introduced something in between. So there are always exceptions to the rules, yeah. But a lot of times you need to actually engage who are your clients and understand what are the problems. So that is the first one. The second one is actually coming back to the tagline of our talk today. Right? We say that it's recognize, empower, and then we go beyond, right? So that first portion is, first of all, you need to really recognize who are your clients. But the second part is understanding the client is one thing, but you also need to empower ourselves, the innovators. In this day and age where we look at everything is data driven, so you can have your decisions will be based on data, facts, and figures. So having ability to use the AI, use the machine learning to help guide decisions. Yeah, for example, Waze. When we drive, of course, for those who are experienced, you already know the road to go to from point A to point B. But when you key in Waze, the Waze will tell you actually you shouldn't go that road that you already been doing this for the past 5 years, for example. And you were like, why? And then you just realize because there's a big traffic jam in front there. So experience wouldn't tell you there is an accident that happened. So having that ability to this data-driven tools to help you decide. So it's the same thing as well as we head towards being a data-driven society. We should rely on a lot of data to help us and to guide us in going to the area that we want to innovate in, to where we can come in and provide solutions for the masses. Yeah. So I think that is the two things that I believe that we should really look at your customers. And number two, the key takeaway point now, we should start having to look at data as well, especially when it comes to digitalization solutions in the field.
Thanks, Dali. There's a lot of clarity in that. You know, the first one you're talking about product fit to market. A lot of innovators, I say, don't just create things out of the whim. And your great example of the chocolate chip, dark chocolate chip. Now I also have to remember that. So it's really interesting. It's actually product fit market. Look at what the market needs, not so much what you like, and don't create it. You're not the sole customer to your product.
Yes.
The second one was very interesting in terms of empower yourself with data, right? Apart from having character and being driven, all of that is great, but empower yourself with data, and your Waze example was great. Dali, during our discussion, pre-discussion to this panelist session, you mentioned that, yes, youths don't have what experience and wise people have, which is experience and years of being in the industry. And you mentioned something that really resonates with the topic today. You mentioned that doesn't matter because you have data. And with technology and the internet, there's no excuse not to do research.
Yes.
And that's where youths have that advantage. You know, that levels the playing field somewhat. And that's what Dali was sharing during the pre-session. And I think that ties in with the second one, empower yourself with data. Data is everywhere. Thanks for that sharing, Dali.
Right.
Now let's talk about agile, being agile. You know, that's what youths and the youngsters are always known for. It's very easy for children and the youth to adapt. They learn languages fast. They deal with difficulties fairly fast. And on agility, let's talk about that. And Azran, totally comes to you because of the different industries that you've been in. The CTO of Gojek, Indonesia's first $10 billion tech startup, says that being agile is the primary method to develop startups' products. And Azran, that comes to you from being in the airline industry, prior to that being in the media industry, and then now in the digital health therapeutics industry, tech software for healthcare. There was so much differentiation, you know, and we're talking about product fit to market. Each product was different. Each market is different. How do you do what you do? Jumping from this to this, and then Vishantini talked about it. You need to still be fast. You cannot sit on innovation for a long time because that burns money. Please share with us, how are you agile in from your experience? What do youths need to know?
So first of all, I want to challenge the notion that jumping from one industry to the other is different, because that's just one lens industry. Across this last 15, 20 years that I've been working on building businesses, I've been trying to solve the same exact problem, which is how do you look at how services are being offered to consumers and find ways to make them 10 times more affordable, 10 times more accessible, and 10 times more convenient. It's the same exact process. Fundraising, hiring, aligning stakeholders, right? Communicating a vision, bringing everyone to its one direction. It's the same across all different industries. But in order to do that, what I found is it's important that we communicate very clearly, right? So when it comes to agility, I want to share another framework, which is THINK, THINK, right? Because it's about, you cannot predict or control what's going to happen to you, but you can decide how you choose to respond. And the key is, how do we respond intentionally rather than react impulsively? So T is about taking control, focusing on what are the actions we can take rather than expecting other people to change when things don't go on our way, right? Whether it's our bosses, our investors, our customers. And while it may not be clear how to fully solve the problem, taking control means focusing on the first steps to move away from that status quo. H is about having a hopeful outlook, learning to be optimistic. And you can train to be optimistic. Look at failures as learning opportunities and being ready to pivot. I is about taking informed actions. Who can we learn from? What data do we need? What's enough to act on instead of being paralyzed by too much analysis? And N is about nurturing our energy levels. And that comes from nurturing ourselves, building our self-resilience skills, right? Mental fitness, or also nurturing our support network, our peers, our mentors, coaches, who can hold space for us, right? And process the issues that we're wrestling with and allow us to reflect and regroup. People who are positive and energize us, and staying away from people who drain us. And finally, as Dr. Dali said, K is about knowing your goals, especially daily and behavioral goals instead of just those long-term outcome goals, right? And so agility is about taking control, having a hopeful outlook, making informed actions, nurturing ourselves and our energy levels, and knowing our goals and direction.
Thanks, Azran. On that, in your experience, does agility even give you new perspectives and better decision making?
The best ideas don't come from a brainstorming session or some kind of, strategic workshop. It comes from doing 19 things wrong and learning from your mistakes. So you need to go through that process.
Thanks.
And Gita, I like what Azran was saying, that throughout my whole discussion, we were having a chat with our partner in Denmark. And he was saying that the key success in terms of when we come for investment, right? Maybe Marissa can correct me here, is people tend to look at those who have already been successful, the founders who are successful. Because like what Azran was mentioning is, you might have different products, you might be going to different industries, but at the end of the day, it's the same things that you're trying to solve. And normally successful founders or successful entrepreneurs, they have that formula, because again, like what Azran said, because of the number of mistakes they made, they kind of funnel a lot of the ideas and understanding of how they want to move forward. I think that's brilliant. I will make sure I'll remember think. Moving forward, Azran.
Think and the 4 C's.
Yes,
I like the easy way to remember things.
I know, it's amazing. We get to take home a lot of cookie points, from Azran.
White chocolate chip cookies.
Yes.
I mean, successes, and you're right, Dali. We see a lot of successes more than the failures. People don't talk as much about the failures. Edison himself talks about the whole, I have not failed, I have found 10,000 ways that didn't work, and he's known for many failures, but we also know him for his successful patents and inventions that he came up with. On that, I would like to hear, let's talk about failures. You need to know that failures are needed. So what would you say I'd like to take a round. I'd like to do it. So Azran, what would you say was the biggest failure that you had that you learned from?
Wow. Okay. So I got fired by my board of directors. Why? Because I thought I had the right strategy. And on paper, it was the perfect strategy. The analysis was clear, robust. But in times of crisis, what I had not learned is that people become less open to new ideas and new approaches. What I had failed to do is to learn that you need to connect before you correct. I had failed to connect with each people so that they see me as their advocate, that I've taken the time to understand their issues and concerns and package my proposed solution to address those needs, rather than charging into a boardroom saying, this is the idea, this is the analysis I've done, this is the perfect answer. It's never about the answer on your PowerPoint or your Excel spreadsheet. It's about whether you've built the connections. Connect before you correct.
Great, nice one. Human
Another gem there,
relationships.
another gem
Human
there.
relationships before ideas, you know?
Yes.
All right,
yes.
Dali, how about yourself? What is your greatest failure?
I think there is a African proverb saying that if you want to go fast, you go alone, and if you want to go far, you go in a group, right? I'm not sure who said it earlier. Is when I tried out to be an entrepreneur in between Proton and back in PETRONAS, my biggest mistake was I tried to do everything myself, and I think this is where Azran pointed out, is when you have too much data, you kind of overthink until you kind of you become paralyzed, right, with all this information that you have, and at the end of the day you're not moving. And I still remember my friend Osamu Goto, who was in Sauber before. He was saying that standing still is like taking a step backwards, because everybody is progressing, right? So if you are not hustling, you're not making sure, like if you hit a wall, you need to pivot, you need to find a different way. So pivoting is always an important thing, and the best way to actually learn all this is when you go through failures, because if you have three attempts and 3 attempts are successful, it's not as worthy as a person who have 3 success out of 10 failures or out of 10 attempts. That 7 failures is the one that give him or her a better idea where to move and how to pivot moving forward. So yeah, again.
Thanks for that sharing. Vishantini, in your experience, you were with Top Glove prior to Synergy. So from the glove industry, you moved to oil and gas. What were your best or greatest failure that you learned from in either industry?
So I would say in my current industry, so even though that I've invented or innovate my current product, but I was not able to sell my product until late last year. So it's been 1.5 years that I've already innovated, I've already filed patent, I've already started marketing my product, but I was not able to sell my product. That's really because, like what Azran mentioned earlier, I did not understand my client pain points. It was like I had a very rough pain points in the beginning. That's when I developed. But really, when I speak to them, when I started presenting to them, there were a lot of other questions that I'm not able to actually answer them. There is so many loopholes, like what I thought, like when I mentioned my frameworks and everything, right? When Azran was telling, you actually learn from the 90 failures and everything else, that how he put it earlier, I think that's when I actually learned, when I start presenting my ideas or my product to my end client. That's when I see there's a lot of loopholes that I did not address my client pain points. Actually, what I thought and what they actually told me is actually 2 different things. So I was actually trying to address all the pain points along that year, and only then I'm able to commercialize after 1.5 years of innovating a new product.
So does that mean that you were tweaking that product again and again, like constantly improving it to suit?
Constantly improving my products, yes.
I see. Thanks for that sharing. And Dr. Melissa Foo, yourself?
It's a tough question, Geet. I think that there's so many failures. I fail at something definitely every day, big and small. But I think, I mean, I've been trying to think of like a biggest one, but it's really hard to just think of one single incident. But I like the example you gave in the beginning, and I think some of the every time some Dali or Azran or Vishantini shared, I was like, yeah, I had that experience too, right? So I think for me, what I realized through different times of like self-reflection is a lot of my failures stemmed from actually not asking. So, I think one of the things as we analyze like failures isn't just like one single one or like many small ones, but it's about what are the things that are sort of always leading to these small things, right? So, the question that Sarah Blakely had from her father, right? Like, what did you fail at today? Actually, it's quite telling because you got to analyze this. It's something about what you're doing that's leading to these little mistakes that you're making all the time. And that gives you a great insight, right? So to share from my perspective, what happened is a lot of my failures are because I don't ask. So I guess I'm the kind of person that I like to think that everything's in control, or I can read up, or I can research something on my own. And sometimes, opening your mouth and asking, like what Dr. Dali did with his son, to just go out to someone who's in the cookie business and ask, right, gives you a lot of insight, right? So for me, I noticed that a lot of my failures, big and small, many of them stem from not really either daring to ask or, being too proud to ask or, so many reasons. Yeah, but that I think is one of the patterns of failure that I get often.
That's a great one. I think it comes from being Asian as well, It's the whole why ask when you can research, why ask when I might sound silly. I'm hired for this reason, like Vishantini, for example, you're hired to create this department. Suddenly you're self-teaching yourself design thinking. What if you had a question? Who do I go to? So thanks for sharing that. Who do you go to, Vishantini, if you were hired for that reason?
So, Gita, I think that's where the secret is. Actually, I don't remember the exact quote from Azran. I think you communicate before you connect, right? Am I right? So
Connect before
okay, the other way around. Okay, but I believe, trying to match with what Azran was saying earlier about why it's important to have character and all this, and where age matters. So for those who are the youth, right, you need to have a mentor, because the best way to learn fast is to share your ideas with your mentor, because your mentor has gone through a lot of experience. They have gone through a lot and understand the different paths that he has gone through, and having a person that you can bounce idea with, it will be good. For example, Azran will be a perfect mentor because of all the different industry he has been, and Alhamdulillah, I believe that he has made it a success in each one of it. I am sure he has a lot of the failures that he's not sharing, but this is where that gem is available. If only we had a lot more of mentors that we have access to.
Yeah, mentorship is a great one. Azran, I think he's selling you there. You'll have a lot of requests for email addresses and handphone number. Where else can we go for mentors? Who were your mentor? Vishantini, who was your mentor? Where did you go for to learn and grow?
So that's exactly why I have my podcast, the Innovators Minutes. So I have about 16 episodes so far. So from all the 16 episodes, that's when I interviewed them, that's exactly when I learned a lot of things. So if you look at my podcast series, right? So I have from people from different backgrounds. Mr. Dali is also from one of them. So I have people from different backgrounds as an innovator, business consultant. So that's when I actually learned from all these people that I've interviewed, from all the aspects of innovating up to commercialization stage. So those people are my mentors.
Awesome. Look at that. She started her own podcast it was win-win, right? You share with everyone and you also learn and gain. That's great. And Dr. Melissa Foo, how about yourself? Who was your mentor? Where did you go seeking for a mentor? Your answers really help because there are a lot of youths tuning in. Where do they go for a mentor?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I usually split my mentors into personal mentors and as well as professional mentors. I think in my professional life, I've definitely been very lucky to have worked with really, really amazing people in the venture industry and investments. And they've all really helped me in my career. So usually these mentors I meet along sort of like my career path. And I think it's a matter of, with mentors, finding someone who is willing to have the time, right? I mean, it's also an investment of time on your mentor's part to kind of sit with you. And so I'm super thankful to, my professional mentors who have actually, despite all the things going on in their lives, kind of like sat down with me in the early stages when I'm doing all these early stage investments to like correct or look at my work and look at all these things. And I think it's amazing. And I feel like mentorship is, for people lucky enough to connect with good mentors, it's definitely very valuable. But also, I hope that you really value it and respect it, and not look at it like you should mentor me or it's something that you must do, right? I think that's something that we as youth, when we reach out to people as potential mentors, something that we need to be mindful of. I mean, sometimes it's not just about the glamour of a person's position, but it's about where they are in their journey relative to yours. So don't just go to seek some big famous name and say, be my mentor, but it's about who you actually connect with in your daily life, someone who understands you, right? And that brings me to my personal mentors. So I actually do have people in my life as well who are not really in my industry, but they kind of understand me as a person, my motivations, where I want to grow in what makes me fulfilled in my life, in my career. And these are actually some educators that I've met. So they belong to the teaching profession, but they have been super helpful in terms of my journey. So in essence, I feel like a mentor isn't a big name to me. It's somebody who understands you, right? It's somebody who understands your journey. So that means actually you should look for the mentors actually in the circles around you, because I feel like those are where I got my best insights from. Yeah.
It's great. I mean, it also reflects, the Michael Jordan's coach never got onto the court and played as well as him. In the sports field, you see that. So you're right, spot on. You can see different things in different angles. I have two more questions, and then there are questions building up in the chat box and the Q&A. So I'm sure there are audience who have burning questions, and let's get to them right after these two more questions, yeah? So Deloitte reported in 2018 that 86% of millennials think that business success should not only be about making profits. And that's what, with millennials and Gen Z, it's all about being purpose-driven businesses. So now we look at businesses needing to extend to service to society, environment, world at large. How do you bridge the gap between purpose and profits? Any volunteers? Okay.
Yeah, let's answer that.
No, you did.
It's all about, to me, I think, because it's about investments. And then when I got into the world of investing, coming from a background in healthcare, I realized that there is such a gap sometimes between how a financially driven investment looks at a business model and how someone who is operational and on the ground, like an entrepreneur or founder, looks at a business model, especially in industries like healthcare, right, where it's something where the impact is so clear and so obvious and it affects each of us daily. So from that, I realized that, when you talk about profits and you talk about purpose, they shouldn't always be sort of like on opposing ends. And what I've noticed and why I've been drawn to entrepreneurship is at the heart of it, it's about solving problems, right? And solving a problem is the most meaningful, it's a very meaningful purpose. But along the way, as we solve the problem, right, and if we solve a very big problem, people start to pay us to solve the problem, right? People start to want our solutions. And that is where the profit comes in. So it actually starts with purpose, right? A lot of things start with purpose. And then if you're very good at delivering the purpose or the solution, or if it's a very, very big problem that you're solving, then the profits may come in. And so if you look at it with that lens, right, that means that when you start a business, you got to keep focusing on that purpose, right? Solving that problem, right? Whether the problem, and as you keep doing that and doing it better, then, the profits come. So to me, it's about not really, in entrepreneurship, never really losing sight of why we create this business model in the first place, right? Why there exists a gap. And then maybe having the profits be a funnel for you to keep innovating to solve more problems, right? Yeah.
Interesting. I think if you look in the healthcare industry, it comes very much the purpose, very much ties in with the profit. And the reason we talk about sustainable businesses is there a bigger picture behind it, and the younger generations are questioning it. Because when oil and gas came into the picture, we were solving a problem. Point A to point, people were traveling point A to point B with fuel, and that was a great problem they were solving. And then it comes to a stage that you're now polluting the earth. We're getting to a stage of we need to look at different renewable energy. So I guess it is a problem for we're passing on the world and passing on the earth with all these problems, and hence the discussion comes about, and that's when I guess the whole thing comes about bridging it, because putting more gas and putting more fuel kind of ruins the earth. So Vishantini, I think you were looking at renewable energies, or in your field, when you're looking at mobile, offshore solutions, right? How do you then, are you under pressure to create more innovations that are more friendly to the earth?
Yes. So if you look at one of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, right? So out of those 17, I think climate action is one, and also contributing to clean energy is one. And recently, oil and gas industry have pledged to the zero carbon emission initiative by the year of 2050. So all of the innovations have to be in line with this initiative, which is the zero carbon emission. So even like my current product, my jet farm, or my renewable energy production enhancement, everything has to tie back to the zero carbon emission initiative. So I think there's not much of innovations besides digitalization. That's one. That's of course that we are focusing on automation and digitalizations, on robotics and everything else. But other physical products or mechanical related products, it has to serve the purpose where it's in line with the zero carbon emission initiative. So there is a pressure for innovation.
That's interesting. The World Organization giving extra pressure. All right, so let me go to question and answers, since time's passing by really fast. We've got Professor J. Philip Vincent. Thank you so much for asking the question. Not so much relevant to the panelists. Why IP registration takes a long time in Malaysia? All right, so this question.
That's your question, Gita.
That is my question. So let me quickly address it before moving on to the next question. Patent protection does take about 4 to 5 years. It's not just in Malaysia. Patent protection takes a long time, and patent is very much relevant to innovation in terms of technology. That's also the timeline taken in most countries because of the examination that it has to be done, and they'll check whether is it new, is it inventive, and then there's a queue. So most IP officers, intellectual property officers in many countries don't have enough examiners. With more and more innovations coming up, they had need to hire more. Some countries export their examination process to another country. Singapore was exporting it to Hungary, but now they have their own examiners. So the process itself takes time, and that's why it takes quite some time. So I'm really sorry for that, but that's how it is in terms of patents. There is expedited tracks. Most countries have expedited tracks. And for example, in Malaysia, if it's green technology, you can expedite your patent application and it'll be in a shorter time span. Hope that explains the question, Prof. Next is a question directed to Azran. Let me see. It's good in ideas and innovation comes when we fail. All right, so good in ideas and innovation sometimes come when we fail, but is it always good to have a it is always good to have a calculated risk, right? So how do you go about that, the whole calculated risk? It's good to fail, but what are the risk factors that you take in?
Okay, maybe I'm going to explain this with a story about base jumping. What's the difference between base jumping and skydiving? Dali?
You're jumping from a structure, right? It's base jumping, for example, KL Tower.
Exactly. So when you're jumping from a plane, 12,000 feet, you got 40 to 60 seconds of free fall, amazing. and then you pull the cord. Sometimes the parachute doesn't open up,
Yeah.
but that's okay because you've got a second backup parachute.
Yes, you got time, yeah.
Base jumping from Menara KL is 437 meters. You look down, you can hear and see the pedestrians on Jalan Raja Chulan and Jalan P. Ramlee.
Yeah.
You have a maximum of 3 seconds to deploy your chute. In that 3 seconds, if that chute doesn't open up, you will get to know Jalan Raja Chulan very, very well. So the difference is base jumpers don't have a second backup parachute. So now you might think this is nuts, especially because the average fatality rate for base jumping is 50 times higher than skydiving. So 1 in 2,500 jumps leads to death compared to 50,000 jumps for skydiving. Now, the person who organizes the base jumping event in KL, well, before COVID, Chris McDougall, right? He's a world champion base jumper. See, when Chris lines up, and I asked him as I was standing on the ledge with my life freaking out, I said, Chris, how many times have you jumped? He said, I do about 1,000 jumps a year for the last 20 years. So that's 20,000 jumps. But if 1 in 2,500 jumps leads to death, how does he do 20,000 jumps? Because that is average. And a world champion base jumper as he is doesn't play by the rules of the average. What's exciting about Chris is before each jump, between 45 to 60 minutes before each jump, he is intensely focused on packing his parachute, every knot, every fold, with a maniacal attention to detail. And when he gets on the ledge, he knows pressure, wind direction, everything, and then he jumps. So preparation can be really, really amazing and beat the odds, right, by 10 times because it's really good, but it only takes an hour. Whereas some people, you give them 3 weeks to prepare, they're still not going to prepare. And when they jump, they're going to have just those basic fatality rates. So it's not about over preparation, but it's that right 1 hour of preparation that's the right level of calculated risk. But you got to jump.
Fine tuning. I like that. You got to jump. Because otherwise it goes back to what Dali said. You stay stagnant. You don't take the risk, you don't move forward, and you just die a natural death.
Yes, yeah. I think Michael Jordan says the same thing. You miss 100% of the shot that you don't take. So you got to jump. Like what Azran said.
So to that person who asked the question, I hope that explains it. He's give you a very visual aspect because we're all imagining jumping now from KL.
No. So Azran,
Right.
you did it, eh? You actually, wow, mashallah.
Dude,
Wow.
man, seriously. Anything that you can see down, you can hear them speaking. I've done bungee jumping twice, but not base jumping.
Yeah, the only difference is no cord, no string. Just jump.
God is everything, Azran. Right. Next, we have a question from Dr. Kavita. Just give me a second. Dr. Kavita says that other than sheer data, what is the best way to change a traditional mindset? What is the best way to change a traditional mindset? It has not been directed to any panelists specifically. Anyone would like to take that?
So again, take for example, if you had a vaccine hesitant friend or family member, do you think that arguing with your friend or family member with all the latest data or statistics is going to win them over? No, it is not about winning over data, because the more you try to influence them with data, the more you're telling them is, you know what, you're stupid, I'm smarter than you. How many people have you successfully convinced by making them feel small and insignificant because you're the smarter one? You need to connect before you correct. Connection means I need to demonstrate that I am on your team, that I understand what your issues and concerns are, that I'm here to address those issues and concerns, and not just to tell you what the right answer is.
Azran, listening to you, I feel like I'm in a HR talk as opposed to an innovation talk. Because you hear this a lot from HR professionals, the whole sandwich method, right? If you're going to give...
Oh, I hate the sandwich method. It doesn't work at all. It's completely
Yours
bogus.
is without the bread on the other side.
Yes.
Yours is one. So you've got to start with something nice, compliment them on what they're doing well. Then you lay down thick on what they need to improve. And then you end it with the good things again. So they leave the room having enjoyed the conversation. So the whole connect and correct is my first two, the first layer of that the slice of bread with the tuna being the correct them. You don't have the layer where you soften it again. But it's interesting how you've brought the whole EQ into perspective in innovation, you know? No one's going to listen to your ideas if they don't feel that you care about them. That's, I guess, the message it is sending. So, Dr. Kavita, I hope that understands it, the whole correction of changing a traditional mindset. Next, we have from Sharda. Hang on. Okay. What happens if your commitment to innovate is not part of the corporate culture or does not match to the tone at the top? So your commitment to innovate is not part of the corporate culture or does not match the tone at the top.
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think everyone, most of my career has always been corporate, right? Sometimes when you do work, you always do, again, similar thing with what my son, you know, you do what you think is best. But at the end of the day, the management and whatnot, they may have a different idea, because at the end of the day, they have a helicopter view of all the problems of the company. So again, communication is key. Before you actually work on a particular innovation or come up with a recommendation for an innovation, first and foremost, you need to understand what is your stakeholder. In this case, it will be your management. What is keeping them up at night? What are the things that you feel will be able to solve their problems? And then the second thing as well, I think Azran brought it up earlier, and I said as well as Marissa, is at the end of the day, you need to be able to tell a story, because sometimes when we present to management, we always present from the technical point of view. We don't sell the idea. We don't sell the romanticized idea about our solution. You know, people are more visual when they are understanding things. So when you're explaining your idea from a narrative point of view, you sell a story rather than the innovation you're talking about. I think that will help as well. So it goes both ways. First, you need to understand what is your stakeholders issue, or not issue, what they are looking for. And then if you really feel strongly about your innovation and you want your management to agree on it, then you need to tell a story. Why is your innovation would be beneficial for the company? And I don't know, that's how I think it is.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that sharing about communicating to the top management. Anyone else? Anything to share? To Sharda? That's a tough one, I think, Sharda. Yeah. That's a tough one, speaking to your management.
Yeah.
Or just resign and write to careers@naluri.life.
Yes. Be your own boss.
Oh, be your own boss. Yes, you innovate. I find that
maybe I don't know, patience. If you can't
that goes back to Melissa. That goes back to you're not asking.
No, patience. I've heard it takes about 7 years. So I mean, like, because I used to work in family businesses, right? And this is something that you can't resign from. And most of the younger generation or next generation family business are always trying to change the traditional ways of their previous generations of doing things. So yeah, so they say, I heard, well, anecdotally, it takes 7 years. So if you can. Patience, communication. Okay. And 7 years with good communication. Like if you ignore it, nothing happens. But if you try to change the previous generation's mindset, I heard it's about 7 years.
This is 7 years in Tibet, right?
That's another panelist discussion altogether. I think management being family members becomes a lot more difficult.
Actually, it's tougher. Actually, yes, it's actually tougher that way. Yeah. So it's.
Yeah, I think you're right. Dali is getting the communication. You need the foot into the door to even speak to them, because I can't see why management wouldn't encourage innovation when if it's more returns on investment. Number one, there's more profits to be made. Of course, they look at money to grow. Then you're looking at value added benefits to your customers, and that's always about innovation. What value can you add to what you're doing? So Sharada, I am sorry you're stuck in that situation if you are stuck in that situation. But yes, you have a job opening in Naluri.
But here's the thing, right? Let's say if you're an entrepreneur, you don't get to do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
First, you need capital. And here's the thing, right? Like you've got to go through tons and tons of rejections. For iFlix Series A, we had 115 investors that rejected us.
Wow.
Most people in corporates, so your boss says no, you give up. Your boss says no 5 times, you give up. That's it. 5 times, 10 times, you give up. Try 115 rejections.
Wow.
Very, very, very insightful. I have no other speakers. Oh wait, there's one more, sorry. As we move forward in the era of 4.0, how can young entrepreneurs and innovators prepare for the next big innovation? It's the whole .com buzz, right? When you hear about all these .com companies, how the investors are all cashing out very fast. Facebook buys someone, WhatsApp is bought over. Any advice? Or it goes back to, or does it go back to the core? The 4 C's, the think.
Well, there's a reason why the average age for venture-funded entrepreneurs is about 42 to 45, not in their 20s, because technology has become more complex, right? Deep tech requires PhD level expertise, right? And commercial applications require having the experience to negotiate complex business agreements with large companies. So building expertise really, really matters. We've gone beyond Web 2.0, marketplaces, e-commerce, right? And so as an investor, the more telling question is not whether someone has got a good business idea or the plan being presented as potential, but whether the founder team has the right skills, experience, tenacity, humility, and experience to be the right team to tackle this opportunity. So just because you've got a good idea doesn't mean you're the right person to do it. That's a bigger question. Why should you be the person tackling this problem?
Thanks for answering that, Azran. Okay, let's go to a final question and then we'll wrap up the session. Data insights are showing that top reasons startups fail include running out of cash flow. Tackle the cash flow problem. How do you work with limited resources?
By the way, I disagree with that. I think the number one reason why startups fail is that founders and teams can't work together.
Yes.
That's a much bigger reason than running out of cash.
Yes.
Dr.
Melissa, that happens in the ventures that you look at?
It's so true. It's actually the founding team. It's very, very, sometimes you actually see teams fall apart and they still hundreds of thousands of cash in the bank. Yeah. So it's, and they just can't work together, or they just decide not to work on the idea anymore for whatever reason. So I agree with Azran on that. Well, funding is an important part of the journey, but if you talk about the failure, oftentimes it's about the founders, and maybe timing. Actually, sometimes they say it's the wrong time, right idea, wrong time. Mm-hmm.
But also, fundraising. I think maybe some people perhaps don't take it seriously enough. Fundraising is a never-ending journey. So I raised my Series A fundraising in April of 2021. Guess what I did in May of 2021? I started raising the next round because it takes 12 to 15 months to complete the next round. Wow. And you only have 12 to 15 months of runway from the money that you raise, right? So if you wait until you think, oh, I've got 6 months left of cash, and then are you going to start fundraising? Good luck. You've just run out of runway.
Sounds like you need a team constantly working at it while you're looking at a lot of other
you can't have, that is something you can't delegate as a founder. You got to go see investors yourself. You got to build relationships. Why should people give you money if they don't know you?
Yes.
Right? It takes 12 months to build a real relationship or longer.
Yeah. Connect before getting funding.
Yeah, actually, I did have something to add to that question about funding, right? I think one of the things that founders have even less of than funds sometimes is actually time. So I say this a lot because, sometimes when founders try to raise funds or even apply for other sources of funding like grants and so on, they sometimes maybe underestimate the amount of time, or sometimes there are, investors that do not understand about the time factor, and they take very, 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 very long to decide or make funding decisions. So this is something that I think founders have really limited access to time, right? And they really need to manage it properly in terms of planning for their next fundraise or deciding what's the best use of my time, right? Is it going out fundraising or is it securing another client, right? Yeah. So I think this thing that managing time is something that they need to understand as founders. But the beauty of it is everyone has the same amount of time, right? I mean, in
24
that
hours,
sense,
yeah.
right? We all have like the same amount of time in a day. So all startups are in a way very equal in terms of how much time they have, but it's just about how they choose to, use it best, right? What can they delegate? What shouldn't they delegate, right? And understanding that in a space of limited resources, I think the people who understand and use time in the best way, right? Use the team, use the time delegation, things like that, is something that is a skill that it will benefit founders and everyone else actually. Yeah. But it's
By the
quite
way,
equal.
time may be a finite resource.
Yeah.
Energy is a renewable resource.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how to manage your energy, if you're constantly burnt out, you're working longer hours, but you're much more ineffective. But if you figure out how do I, perform at peak energy levels, how do I replenish and rejuvenate my energy levels, I can get more done.
So with that, since we are ending on time, and I totally respect each of your time, thank you from a sincerest heart, the bottom of my heart, and our team. KASS really thanks all of you for sharing your insights. It never ends. The questions can go on, and there's more questions to address, but it's going to take too much time. And I want to ensure that all of you have peak energy to go back to your purposeful organizations after this. So thank you once again. You'll be getting a gift from KASS because we really appreciate you sharing with all the youth and the business owners today on how to innovate and all the challenges that you have faced in your session, in your experience, sorry. Thanks again. And to the attendees, thank you for taking time on your Wednesday afternoon to come and learn. You got mentorship from all of these experienced individuals here. I know we're talking about mentorship being important, and you've got 1.5 hours of tips from them. There is a survey. Once you leave this room, there is a survey they would like you to take so that we can learn from your feedback that you give. Please take 1 minute of your time to submit the survey. And we hope to cross paths with all of you attendees and the speakers. Thank you once again, and go on and innovate.
Yes.
Fail fast. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.